Thanks for checking out this video. I'm Tyler. If you like what you're seeing or you find this video to be useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, or better yet, you can hit that subscribe button. Now, to really show me some love, click on the bell for alerts and notifications for future content. Oh yeah, don't forget to check out my merch store, tylermossop.com. As in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 things you ought to know when it comes to caring for your snake plants. Love these plants, they are fantastic. And also in this video, I will be repotting this into a larger pot, dividing it up, so propagating it, if you will, and sharing all of those crucial care tips that you ought to know. All right, guys, snake plants are hugely popular and frankly a houseplant must-have. Now, I have a couple of these, a larger one, and this was one that I believe I had propagated, and now it is kind of busting out of this container and ready to be repotted. I think what I'm going to do is kind of divide and conquer and separate it and throw it into this really large, kind of more of a centerpiece pot and container. Unfortunately, that doesn't have drainage, but I'm gonna share some tips and tricks on what to do so that, it's not the biggest deal. But yeah, this guy is pretty happy. Some new growth coming out, some new pups, which is just fantastic. As I said, it's really filling out this container, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing 5 things that you ought to know, and we'll start with the soil composition, what soil is best to use. I'm gonna mix that up and share that information with you guys right now. As snake plants appreciate a really good, well-draining soil mix, so because of that, today I'll be using a orchid mix, which has a lot of bark, as well as some perlite. So I'm going ahead and using about 4 or 5 parts of the orchid bark mix and then 1 part of that perlite. Now, I would kind of suggest or recommend that you avoid adding, if any, the sort of peat moss to your mix for these plants, because it can become very easily compacted, and you're gonna want to avoid that. As I said, snake plants really appreciate something that is well draining, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this. Now, because I mentioned that I'm going to be using a container without drainage, you could go ahead and use some horticultural charcoal at the base. What that will do will absorb any excess water and just help kind of mimic some drainage at the bottom of the container. So if you have that, or if you can find that at your local nursery, I would recommend going ahead and using that at the base of the container, which is really great if there isn't any drainage. So I went ahead and put in the soil mix here about halfway up the container, which brings me to the second thing you ought to know. You can propagate these by division, and what that means is you can separate these apart and pot them separately. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is separate these and pot them all in the same container in the hopes that they will multiply even more and create a fuller kind of centerpiece in this container. So first things first, I'm just going to very carefully try to remove this from the container, which happened really easily. And I think that's in part because, like I said, it's pretty root bound in the container. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you guys a close-up, get rid of some of the loose soil, and then give you a close-up of the roots. So there you can see the roots are looking nice and healthy. Definitely time to repot this guy. I'm not even sure if you can see some of the horticultural charcoal poking through the bottom there, but yeah, this is really great, and this is what your roots should look like. So let's go ahead and divide this up. And before I do that, I'm not sure if you can see, there is a little cute one coming through right there. A little pup snake plant there. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there you go. Hopefully this is in focus and you can see it a lot better. Next thing you would want to do is, and the next thing I'm gonna do is just very carefully sort of separate some of these different plants from one another. Really important to keep that baby one attached for now. It's a little bit too small, but this is going quite well. Let's see if I can just kind of very carefully and gently You could go ahead and use like a sharp, you know, sanitized knife or something like that, but this is separating pretty well. So here we have, I mean, we can keep these two kind of together and then maybe separate this once more. Perfect. So basically I've taken one plant, separate it 3 ways, and I'm going to repot these 3 in this container here. And like I said, the hopes are, and actually look, this one just separated off. The hopes are that over time, this whole container will fill in with new pups, and that should look pretty cool, especially on my dining table as a centerpiece. So let me go ahead, remix or mix up some more of that bark and perlite, and then fill in kind of all the gaps, and then we can get started on those other things that you ought to know. So I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out and how it's looking. Now, if you are going to be repotting snake plants, it's recommended, it's best to do that in the springtime. So we're just basically heading into spring now. So perfect time to kind of propagate, separate by division, and repot this in this new container. Now, it probably will take a season or 2 for this to start to really sort of fill out with little new baby pup snake plants, but I think it will definitely be worth the wait. So let's jump into the third thing you ought to know about caring for your snake plants, which is lighting. So when it comes to lighting for these guys, you may hear stuff that, you know, these are kind of low light plants or whatever the case may be, but I highly recommend giving your snake plants dapple light. And what that means is really good bright indirect light with hits of some direct sunlight. So always morning sun is best. It's a little bit less intense than midday light. So if you can find a place in your home where this is, you know, a couple feet away from maybe an east facing window or a south facing window, but inset a little bit more, it should get some really good light. Obviously, the more light, the better the light situation is, you know, I feel like the faster and the more it will thrive and flourish. So a couple key tips there with lighting. The next thing that you ought to know is in and around watering. Now, we've already talked about having a loose, well-draining soil composition or soil type. That's why we went ahead and used perlite and orchid bark. And the reason for that is that these plants really appreciate drying out in between waterings. So, you know, you wouldn't want to be watering this so frequently that the soil doesn't get a chance to completely dry out. I really kind of, you know, am quite conservative when it comes to watering my snake plants. You know, once a month, maybe that is really all they kind of need. And especially with this container, there's less drainage. So that's something that I'm going to be a little bit conscientious about. Again, watering is always a function of the amount of light that it's receiving. So the more of that sort of dapple or direct sunlight that it's receiving, you may want to water this a little bit more frequently during the spring and summer. But another really important tip when it comes to watering is slowing that down, the frequency down of watering during the winter season. So that means you can water it even less, maybe once a month, once, you know, every 90 days or something like that, just to really 90 days or even 60 days, maybe, you know, 45 days, just reduce that watering frequency during the winter months when maybe the light isn't as intense or it's not getting the type of light it would get during the summer months. So that really wraps it up for watering, but probably one of the things that I see or hear about people getting kind of wrong the most is they're often watering these things too frequently. Last but definitely not least, the fifth thing you ought to know, hope I got all of those 5 tips in there, is fertilizing your snake plant. Now, the best thing to do with that, or the thing that I recommend, is using a well-balanced or just a balanced liquid fertilizer. You can dilute that to 50%, and I recommend that you use that throughout, you know, monthly, throughout the growing season, spring and summer. So it would be a great time for me now to, you know, fertilize this guy with some liquid, well-balanced diluted fertilizer, like I mentioned, and then repeat that probably every month until the end of the summer. That will really help make sure that these guys are getting the conditions met that they need in order where to propagate even more, grow more, and put out some of those new pups. But basically, those are the things that I would pay most attention to when it comes to caring for these beautiful houseplants. Well, that's it for me. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and until the next one.